Welcome to our Gender Identity and Gender Pronouns Guide by Katerina Gulko, Brian Harrison, Yvonne Harrison, and Holly Hastings. What to expect in this presentation. To extend respect and build trust with colleagues and patients by normalizing gender pronouns, by volunteering your own pronouns. Don't assume misgendering or outing someone can reproduce trauma and othering. Think about the overlapping of race and gender identity. It requires unique acknowledgement and approaches to mental health. Gender is a spectrum. There are more than two ways to be.
All right, so let's talk about understanding identity, and to help us, we've brought along the gender unicorn. So you can express your identity and gender in a variety of different ways. Of course, first of all, there's always gender identity. That's your traditional female, woman, man, male, boy, and other, of course. And it is each person's internal and individual experience of gender. It's their sense of being a woman, a man, both, neither, or anywhere along that spectrum. Next, there's gender expression. That's a feminine quality, masculine quality, androgynous, other, whatever you want to be. And it is how a person communicates their gender to the world. This can include behavior and outward appearance such as dress, hair, makeup, body language, and voice. A person's chosen name and pronoun are also common ways of expressing gender. Of course, we have the sex assigned at birth, female, male, other. So sex is usually assigned at birth, and it's based on an assessment of a person's reproductive systems, their hormones, their chromosomes, and other physical characteristics. And then lastly, you have what they are attracted to, either physically or emotionally. When you consider sexual orientation as an inherent or immutable, enduring emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to other people, this term expresses a person's sexual identity in relation to the gender to which they are attracted to.
Consider the weight of systemic barriers that exist for someone who identifies as part of an underrepresented racial and gender group. Marsha P. Johnson, pictured above, a Black trans woman, is credited as being one of the main activists who led the 1969 Stonewall riots in New York City, which is an integral moment in igniting the modern-day queer rights movements across the world. Black people and trans activists have always been at the front of LGBTQ2S+ protests in Toronto, following the 1981 Bat House raids. There has been an assumption that Black, Indigenous, and racialized people are not queer and could only belong to communities of color, rather than the LGBTQ2S+ community. The Toronto For All campaign, pictured here on the right, and the more recent use of the Pride Progress flag takes into consideration the racial lens to the gender identity and sexual orientation spectrum.
What are your pronouns? So now let's think about, in this presentation, of how you would introduce yourself with your pronouns. For example, my name is Kat. My pronouns are she and her.
My name is Brian. My pronouns are he and him.
My name is Yvonne, and my personal pronouns is she or her.
And my name is Holly, and my personal pronouns are she and her. You can't use a plural pronoun in English to refer to one person. Actually, plural pronouns have already been used this way in English. Singular you was resisted at first, just like singular they is today. But it's been centuries since anybody objected to singular you. Some say he and she are the only grammatically correct singular personal pronouns, and you can't change grammar just because it doesn't work for a few people. But languages are living tools created by and for the people who speak them. And when the needs of those speakers change, so do languages. English pronouns have already changed several times in history. From Old to Middle English, people said thou, singular, and ye, plural, instead of our modern you. After the Norman conquest of England brought a French influence into English, plural ye became singular and was used to indicate someone's higher status. Kind of like plural vous conveys respect in French. However, because of social class boundaries, were becoming more fluid in England, thou started to feel like an insult as it implied a lower status. So you gradually took over despite facing initial resistance.
If we agree to use ze or her, or singular they, soon we'll have to memorize a different pronoun for everybody. Actually, respecting a few people's gender-neutral pronoun isn't the same as agreeing to use a different pronoun for everyone you know. That doesn't make any sense. The explanation is, it's true that there is more than one gender-neutral pronoun, like singular they or them, or ze or her instead of she or her, but agreeing to use someone's gender-neutral pronoun today doesn't mean agreeing to memorize an endless list of pronouns down the road. This is what philosophers call a slippery slope argument. In a slippery slope argument, there's no evidence for big bad outcome people fear. Just like there's no evidence that people everywhere are beginning to make up their own pronouns. Without evidence, people try to prevent the first step by making the outcome sound as scary as possible. But a major problem with the slippery slope arguments is that most situations aren't slippery. They're more like staircases, where each stair is a different decision, and each decision is made separately based on its own unique issues and evidence. The slippery slope just isn't a good reason not to use someone's preferred pronoun.
I support transgender people, but I won't use someone's pronoun if it's political. So actually, everyone has a gender pronoun preference. Saying another person's preference is political is basically telling them they should look more like a man or like a woman. And that is extremely unsupportive of transgender people. So to explain all that, how do you know whether someone's gender pronoun preference is political or not? Some people's preferences are obvious, some aren't. When something isn't obvious, it stands out because it takes more thought. Some transgender people stand out because they don't look like what we think a man or woman should look like. Maybe they don't identify that way. Or maybe they don't have the money or support to access hormones, surgeries, and clothes. Some pronoun skeptics feel like it's too much to ask, that they expect a little effort because it should be easy to know which pronoun someone uses. But it's only easy to know when someone looks exactly like what you want them to look like in the gender department. Needing a transgender person to look a certain way in order to use their pronoun is not being supportive of transgender people.
Under Bill C-16, I could be charged with a hate crime if I get someone's pronoun wrong. Actually, unless you've also committed a crime like assault or vandalism while intentionally calling someone the wrong pronoun, a mistake can't send you to jail. So keep on not doing those things and you should be fine. Explanation. Bill C-16 adds gender identity and gender expression to the hate crimes provisions of the Criminal Code, advocating genocide, public incitement of hatred. These provisions already set out identifiable groups based on things like national or ethnic origin, sexual orientation, and mental or physical disability. They are rarely used and are carefully written to only apply in extreme cases, like where someone calls for the destruction of an entire group. The third provision changed by Bill C-16 only applies when someone is being sentenced. It instructs judges to treat hate motivation as a factor that may lead to a more severe sentence for an offense, like assault or vandalism. Even with Bill C-16's changes, you can't be charged with a hate crime just for using the wrong pronoun.
Okay, so let's start some conversations here. So we want to avoid assumed use of gendered titles. These are things like ma'am, sir, miss, Mr., lady, gentleman. We only would use these after we've confirmed how someone wants to be identified. Let's take email, for example. So when you're writing an email, it's not a requirement to use a gender-specific title, so consider just using their first and last name, along with gender-neutral programs. And you can use MX as a gender-neutral title as well. Some sample conversations that actually remove gendered pronouns. Hi there, how are you today? How can I help you today? What would you like support with? Or I'd like to confirm the name you go by. Great, thank you so much for giving me that information. Another example might be anything else you would like to tell me to help us better meet your needs. So when we talk about gender specific and gender neutral pronouns, she, his, he, hers. So gender neutral pronouns are they, them, their. And there are some other ones now, Z, C, Z, and here. And those are spelled, as you can see right there, Z-E, S-I-E, Z-I-E, H-I-R. An example of that in conversation would be something like, I saw Lauren come to work today, and Z seemed really unhappy. I wonder if it has anything to do with here weekend. I hope to see here soon and hear about it. You can always ask, you can always just ask what their pronouns are or how they wish to be addressed. And it's about respect. If someone takes the time to let you know that their name and pronoun are, you're respecting their preferences. In practice, if you have difficulty using someone's pronoun and name, just practice at it. Ask coworkers, peers, friends to point out when you've made a mistake. And that's really the important part, is just asking and including and making the best effort to make sure that you're doing your best to not exclude someone.